My name is Claire Matthews, and the moment I saw the transactions, I knew the life I'd built with Daniel was already cracking along its seams. We married in a courthouse under the gray November sky of Ohio, two people with practical dreams and a stubborn sense that doing the right thing meant never cutting corners. Daniel ran the small family contracting business. I handled the books and the client's schedules. For 10 years we were a system, his steady hands and my careful ledger, until I learned how easily systems could be gamed and how much uglier the truth looks when it sits on paper. At first there were subtle signs. Daniel came home later some nights with hollow laughter in his voice, or he let his phone sleep face down on the kitchen counter. He stopped asking about the numbers. He drank to blur the edges of conversations I couldn't finish. I told myself those were the ordinary fissures of marriage, tiredness, stress, the slow erosion that becomes polite silence. I was wrong in the worst way. The discovery happened in the quiet between midnight and the dawn I used to wrap invoices. I'd been reconciling accounts because a client complained the crew never showed and my spreadsheet wouldn't quit nagging. That's when a line item twisted me, a wire labeled materials advance that diverted to a private account I didn't recognize. Next to it, a second wire. Then a pattern, small, frequent transfers that mimicked payable schedules but skimmed profit into an outside pocket. The numbers were surgical. My hands trembled. I remember the physical sensation like a bruise forming in my chest. The room grew sterile and loud at once. I had to tell him. Because he was my husband, because the law required honesty between partners when your name was on the line. I slid the printouts across the kitchen island and watched him read. He didn't shout. He didn't collapse. He sat very still, as if trying to weigh the right words like a mechanic calibrating pressure. His face folded into a shape I recognized, hurt, then 12 shades colder. "Claire," he said finally, quiet as the knock that came before a storm. Did you sign these?" I couldn't look at him. I lied. I said, "I thought so." I watched his jaw work, and I felt a foreign animal stir in my gut. When the truth landed, because secrets have their own weight, he found the shell companies, the ghost vendors, the blank invoices filled in with my handwriting. It became clear, too, that I had been the one to authorize certain payments on his word. He had owned me that way, my trust used like a stamp. The breakdown was not cinematic in the way films make it pretty. It was small and relentless, dinners at the table where we couldn't meet eyes, a lawyer named Morgan in a terse suit who explained fiduciary duty and criminal referrals, the clerk at the bank who put holds on accounts, the clients whose deposit checks stopped clearing. Daniel folded inward, more controlled than his rage had any right to be. He didn't break things, he built a case. There was a realization in him that was colder than grief. He realized I had not only betrayed him personally but had tried to steal from the business, the livelihood of employees, the contractor who trusted us with a down payment, the foreman who staked his reputation on Daniel's company. That shift hardened Daniel. The man who toasted our marriage with thriftiness became someone who read statutes for sport. He slept in the office more than the house, reviewing paper trails and the white glow of a desk lamp. I watched him move through the legal steps like a chess player. He hired an attorney, not for revenge, he told people, for preservation. Morgan advised immediate forensic accounting, cease and desist letters to the shell accounts, freezing of credits, and, most important, documented evidence that would survive the messy theater of divorce. Daniel insisted on every formal step, asset valuations, chain of custody for records, sworn statements from employees who remembered the quirks of invoices. He refused any shortcuts. While he collected evidence, Daniel also reclaimed the narrative. He notified the insurance carrier of potential fraud, arranged emergency payroll through a backup line of credit, and made sure employees were paid from legitimate funds. He secured client contracts with transparent accounting and personally met each contractor to explain the discrepancy, never the private, ugly details, but the ropes of truth that would hold when the dust settled. It was strategic, almost surgical. I watched him from the doorway as he stitched the business back into something the deceit couldn't corrode. Revenge, when it finally arrived, wasn't a late-night scene in a dark alley. It was in courtrooms, in bank boardrooms, and in signatures. He served me papers, divorce, injunctions, an accounting demand. Then he did something I hadn't expected. He turned evidence over to the state attorney's office and handed a compressed packet to the company's insurer. He didn't call the tabloids. He didn't smear me on social media. He let the law do what it does best when fed by meticulous proof. Daniel's plan was precise because it aimed to be untouchable. He had backup copies of everything, notarized affidavits from 2 vendors who had never received the funds they were invoiced for, email chains showing directives to send payments to the shell, courier receipts proving deliveries never took place. The forensic auditor's report he commissioned read like an indictment. When the bank investigated, it found the transfers originated from accounts opened in my name, but with falsified IDs and an IP address that traced to a cafe several towns over. At trial, there was a moment that felt like an axiom: you cannot inflict slow, careful harm on people whose lives you have entwined and expect to walk away untouched. The judge listened to testimony from employees who'd never imagined their paychecks compromised. He reviewed ledgers Daniel taught them to fear by teaching them to read. I sat through the hearing with a hollow stomach and an aching understanding of the humiliation I'd sown. Daniel testified calmly, his voice measured, not theatrical. He read the ledgers aloud as if narrating a will. The verdict was not a melodramatic sentence from a vengeful jury, it was accountability. The state secured restitution orders that sought to replace what had been taken, the company reclaimed assets that had been laundered through shell entities. Civil suits unspooled alongside criminal inquiries, and by the time the last check cleared, Daniel had protected the company's future. The employees were whole enough to keep working. Clients returned because Daniel had offered transparency where I had offered deception. After the legal dust settled, Daniel stood where we'd once stood together, on a porch with paint chipping on the step, and he let himself breathe. He had lost affection, perhaps trust forever, but he had not lost his moral claim to his life. He walked away from me not with theatrics but with a quiet, irrevocable closing of a door. He sold the house months later, set up a trust to shield the business from future personal entanglements, and hired independent management oversight, someone who reported to a board rather than a marriage. I tell this not to ask for pity but because someone must narrate the shape of the fall. I am the author of the betrayal and the witness to the justice it invoked. The humiliation carved lines I won't be able to erase. I paid restitution, faced sentencing that included community service and extended restitution payments, and surrendered any managerial claim to the company I'd once helped build. But the punishment was not the important part, what mattered was Daniel's refusal to be destroyed by what I did. He walked away stronger because he turned pain into procedure, anger into evidence. He reclaimed dignity by keeping the fight lawful and focused on repair rather than spectacle. In the end, the law did not return what was lost. Some things are irretrievable, but it created an order that the deceit could not easily penetrate again. Daniel moved on with a life remade on firm ground. And that is the last real cruelty I inflicted. I forced his transformation into a man who needed nothing from me to be whole. The final image I carry is him closing the office door one evening, pausing on the threshold, and teaching himself to breathe again. I listened from the car across the street, feeling small and convicted and, in a way I never expected, grateful, because the dark justice he achieved was lawful, precise, and inevitable. That was the last day she ever had power over him, and the first day he started to breathe again.
If you made it this far, thank you for listening to this story. Your support means more than you know. Before you go, drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one of them. And if you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Betrayal Nation. Help us reach our first milestone of 1,000 subscribers. We're almost there, and your support truly keeps this channel alive.